Hello everyone, I'm Mikey and I'm broadcasting you live from beautiful Trump Studios here in COVID shithole USA. I'm joined by my co-host, Slicks, and today we're wanting to talk about a Twitter thread I found about Batman. It's by a fella named Sean Kelly, and there's no doubt that he posted this now because the trailer for the new Robert Pattinson movie just got dropped harder than Batman drops that guy with the face paint.
The hell are you supposed to be?
That dude got fucked up. Now I wanted to talk about my boy Sean's thread because the response I've seen to it has been mostly positive, and I, however, have quite a few issues with just about everything that he says. And before we get started, this thread deals with police brutality in America, so if you don't want to hear about that, I understand. You probably shouldn't watch this. But also, I wanted to say that I don't have a problem with this thread because it is very anti-police. I myself am very anti-police. The police in America kind of fucking suck, and I just wanted to make that clear that I'm not defending the police before I get comments calling me a bootlicker. With that intro out of the way, enough dicking around, how about we just dive right in? What do you say, Slicks? My thoughts exactly. One of the big problems with dark and gritty Batman movies is that the people writing them can't craft a mystery that's so complex only Batman can solve it, so Batman's superpower ends up being the ability to violate people's constitutional rights. So right off the bat, Sean, let me extend a bit of an olive branch. I'll agree that I don't think the movies have ever properly shown Batman's detective skills, and I think they should improve that element, but at the same time, if they do that, then this whole thread kind of becomes irrelevant because it's predicated on the idea that the dark and gritty Batman movies don't have a complex enough mystery. And this is the smallest, admittedly pretty nitpicky issue that I have, but he's not consistent with his use of quotation marks. He puts quotes around dark and gritty and around superpower to imply that he's saying those things sarcastically, but then he puts quotes around the part about constitutional rights, which he clearly isn't joking about. But again, this is kind of nitpicky and by far the smallest problem. Batman gets results because he doesn't have to follow the rules that cops do, thus implying that cops would be much more effective at their jobs if they didn't have to follow those rules. And the grittier the Batman movie is, the fewer powers he's granted through his wealth. In a heightened reality, Batman has supercomputers, ninja skills, and fascinating non-lethal gadgets. A gritty Batman has all the same powers as a cop in riot armor with no legal restrictions. If Jim Gordon tied up a criminal and beat the shit out of him while screaming, "Tell me where the girl is," he'd be subject to lawsuits, suspensions, etc. Batman's only superpower in a gritty movie is that no one can stop him from hurting people. Something that becomes more likely as I read through this is that I feel like this guy watched the Nolan Batman movies once when they came out and then never again, because Batman does have all those things. He does have supercomputers, he does have cool ninja skills, and he does have non-lethal gadgets. I say the Nolan movies because he specifically references a moment from one of those movies later, but also those are the only relatively realistic Batman movies, and even those movies clearly exist in a heightened reality. The Batman of the 80s and 90s had wonderful toys that did set him apart from the police force, and they emphasized his battles against similarly heightened supervillains with ray guns and magic plants and exploding rubber ducks. He's not just putting muggers in wheelchairs. When Batman was first created, policing was very primitive, and the gulf between what the cops had, 6 shooters and cars that didn't have seatbelts, and what Batman has was much greater, which made the necessity of Batman seem much greater. Nowadays, though, when the GCPD officer calls in the suspect is driving a black tank, it gets a laugh. But why? Cops have tanks. Cops have lots of tanks. Cops have armor on par with what a gritty Batman wears. They have shock batons and gas grenades and thermal imaging. Alright, as I said earlier, Batman does have skills and equipment that the Gotham Police Department don't have. And again, they may be more realistic compared to the comics or the other movies, but these are still heightened characters. These villains could never exist in real life, and they're much worse than just ordinary muggers. I mean, fucking Bane was going to detonate a nuclear bomb in a major city filled with millions of innocent people just to get back at Bruce Wayne. Like, what are you talking about, dude? These are super villains. He's not just running around snapping the spines of petty criminals trying to feed their families. If these characters were completely realistic, then, I mean, Scarecrow would have blown himself up trying to make his fear toxin in some makeshift lab in a dilapidated basement somewhere. The Joker wouldn't be some anarchist mastermind. He'd be a loser who detonates a fertilizer bomb at a post office and then gets caught by the feds. Two-Face probably would have died from the shock of having half of his fucking head melted off. Bane would just be some Blackwater goon contracted to do terrible shit in other countries. He definitely wouldn't be a roided out lunatic in a crab mask who's looking to blow up a city because his ninja school got burned down. So is it really that much of a stretch that the police in Gotham aren't as militarized as real American police are? Physically, cops nowadays have pretty much all the same capabilities as Batman does. The only thing that makes him different from them is that he gets to be worse than them. This is what makes Batman an advertisement for abusive policing. Packed movie theaters cheering for brutal violations of our social contract, and an implication that we could have thousands of Batmans if we just look the other way and let the cops take care of things. And truly, I've got a lot of angry Facebook uncles who have said just that when talking about the protests in our cities the past several months. If we all look the other way for a night, the cops could take care of this once and for all. Now, this is one of the biggest issues I have with this thread, because Batman is not worse than the police. Okay, he does not brutalize people at traffic stops. He doesn't execute people in the streets. Batman does not kill people. I mean, he's not supposed to kill people. It's kind of a core element of his character, and I think that alone disqualifies him from being worse than the police. Now, everything else in this part just feels like the same logic that boomer conservatives have with video games, right? Like, oh, these video games are too violent for kids, and it's gonna warp how they view reality. We gotta change them. Oh, these Batman movies aren't close enough to real life. It's gonna warp how adults view reality. We gotta change them. If someone is too stupid to distinguish a fantasy from reality, it's not the fantasy's fault. Okay, that's not the thing that needs to change. And I seriously doubt that the fucking Christopher Nolan Batman movies have had any kind of meaningful impact on the way that the general public views the police in America today. How does one address this? Simple. Make Joe Chill a cop. It's hardly beyond the scope of imagination that a crooked cop in an economically blighted city could be committing crimes on the side. Our real history is full of cops committing domestic abuse, rape, and murder. So make Joe Chill into Officer Joe Chill. 10-year veteran of the GCPD, he tries to rob the Waynes, things go sideways, and he guns them down. Bruce identifies him at the station, but the other cops cover for him, saying Bruce is confused. Joe Chill says that yes, it was his police sidearm used in the murder, but that's because his gun was stolen from him. You know how these animals in Gotham can be. He gets 2 months paid leave as punishment for losing his sidearm. So instead of spending 10 years learning how to fight against street crime and mob bosses, he spends 10 years with his eyes firmly fixed on police corruption, the Blue Boys Club that protects murderers. Bruce knows that when cops die, that's when cities begin to crack down in new and horrifying ways. He's careful to never take a life. When he catches a cop beating his wife, shaking down a store owner, or abusing a black man at a traffic stop, he leaves them tied up and dangling. Conservative pundits around Gotham would immediately label Batman a menace, and even as Batman starts using his computers and surveillance cameras to prove he was in the right and the cops were dirty, people would still flock to defend the cops' bullshit version of events. Joe Chill, of course, is now the commissioner, untouchable, beloved by the public for a series of high-profile crackdowns on things like petty theft and homeless people sleeping on subway vents for warmth. He's sending in cops in riot armor to break up tent villages under overpasses. He's arresting people who try to feed the homeless. He's making the cops more and more militarized, and Gotham's wealthy elite love him for it. Now, this is the moment where this thread completely falls. You look at the fucking camera, you stupid piece of shit. This is the moment where the thread completely falls apart. I mean, making Joe Chill a cop. Not only that, but the commissioner is just stupid. Now, he says this in an effort to have a more accurate depiction of the police, but it's not. Or is it? It's not. For those of you who aren't aware of a thing called civil asset forfeiture, let me break it down for you.
Break it down for me.
It's a practice the police use in which they can seize your money or your property if you're even suspected of any criminal wrongdoing. You don't have to be... learn to fucking talk. You don't have to be arrested. You don't have to be charged. Nothing. Even if you are charged and you prove that you're innocent in a court of law, they can still keep your money and your property, in which they're going to sell in online auctions, and then they'll keep that money. So why then would a cop skulk around in alleyways waiting for people he can mug when the police have more efficient and more legal means of just stealing things from people? Not only that, but Joe Chill is not supposed to be the final boss for Batman. He's nobody. He's a random mugger who opens Bruce's eyes to what life is like for a lot of people in Gotham. He's the catalyst for Bruce Wayne becoming Batman. He's not supposed to be his arch nemesis. But going back to the problem of realism for a moment, there is no fucking way that a cop would be able to murder two multi-billionaires, one of whom is the CEO of a massive American-based tech company, and get away with it in front of a witness. He fucking shoots them in front of a witness and still gets away with it because the local police department covers for him? Could you imagine if a regular ass LAPD officer fucking shot Elon Musk and Grimes in the face in front of little XA12, whatever that poor kid's name is? That dude would be buried in a 10-foot deep hole underneath the prison. There is no way he's gonna get away with it, let alone become the fucking commissioner? I mean, if you say so, dude. Alright, there's regular people like you and me. There's the government, so law enforcement, various elected officials. And then up here, past the screen, are the ultra wealthy, which Thomas and Martha Wayne certainly would be if they were real. Okay, the people here are firmly placed under the boot heel of the people up here. The local police department covers for him. Even in the story where, my service weapon was stolen and used to murder two multi-billionaires, he would at the very least be fired. There's no fucking version of this where that guy becomes the commissioner, dude. This is so ridiculous. Another problem, in case there weren't enough already, regarding the realism of these changes is that Bruce Wayne would have no reason to become Batman. Because in the real world, there are countless foundations across the country created by the wealthy elites with the purpose of giving money to various police departments in various states and cities in order to influence how they operate, with the ultimate goal of benefiting them, the wealthy elites. So if this premise were trying to be completely realistic, I mean, for starters, Joe Chill would be in prison, but putting that aside, Bruce Wayne would just create a similar foundation, except with the opposite goal of having the police be more focused on de-escalating conflicts, peaceful resolution. When Batman is fighting criminals, He has to operate outside the law because they couldn't catch Joe Chill. The police couldn't find him. He took matters into his own hands, and in his course for revenge, he discovered that he could be more than that. He could help people. He could prevent the crime that happened to him from happening to other people. And so that's why he operates outside the law. But because he operates outside the law, he understands that he has to have limits. If he just runs around killing anyone he deems worthy of killing, then at that point he isn't any better, morally speaking, than the kind of criminal who killed his parents. So having him not kill people because he only fights cops and he knows what cops do when one of their own is killed, that just doesn't sit right with me, because at that point you're just completely changing the core of his character. This is another admittedly pretty minor thing, but do people get arrested for feeding the homeless? I mean, I've fed homeless people, I've given homeless people money, and I don't know, I've never seen this happen or heard of this happening to anybody. It's possible, maybe I'm wrong.
Gonna want to take a quick note of how he says. He says that Joe Chill is beloved by the public. It's gonna be important later in a minute here.
Jim Gordon is explicitly called out in the story for being the coward he is. In most portrayals of his early career, he's seen as a lone good cop surrounded by corrupt ones, but Batman shames him for the things he's allowed to happen right in front of him. Bruce Wayne, meanwhile, has returned to Gotham after a long absence and is upsetting the wealthy elite in the way he behaves. He's opened Wayne Manor to the indignant of Gotham City. The entire grounds are swarming with poor people. He doesn't allow cops inside. The people have had enough. They're rising up in protests against the cops. The cops are out for blood. Riot shields at the ready, gas grenades, they've got beanbag rounds and tasers and batons. Okay, so Jim Gordon is just a spineless coward who only exists to get shit on by Batman. Sure, that's super cool, why not?
Remember how I said to take a note of how Joe Chill is beloved by the public? Because it will come back into play later. Well, it's later, you're in the future, it's coming into play right now.
So he says that people are rising up and protesting the cops, but earlier in the thread, he says that the public loves Joe Chill. And I understand you go online or interact with people, you're going to find plenty of people who still defend the police and love them no matter how many people they murder or abuse or harass or whatever. And you're going to find people who hate them. But when you're talking about one city in particular, the general consensus swings one way or the other. And since this is all in Gotham, one city, which way is it? And not only that, but Bruce Wayne housing hundreds, possibly thousands of people in his house doesn't make any sense. I mean, like, someone's gonna find the Batcave. It's only a matter of time when you have that many people. Someone's gonna slip and open the secret door that has the button that opens the whatever, or however it works. That's gonna happen eventually. It's only a matter of time. Wouldn't it make more sense if Bruce instead funds a series of homeless shelters across the city? Because that's another thing. You know what, Sean, I'm feeling generous. You're gonna get 2 olive branches. That's another thing I will admit, how Bruce Wayne's philanthropy isn't really shown in the movies the way that it is in the comics. Whenever you see Bruce in the comics, he's always at a fundraiser or some charity. He's always raising money for a good cause, or he's funding his own money into projects that are going to benefit the city. And that just hasn't really been shown as much in the movies. So I'll agree with you there. But the people of Gotham have Batman. When the cops get ready to assault the peaceful protesters, that's when Batman drops out of the sky, neutralizing their less lethal armaments, taking them down before they can hurt anyone. Batman takes control of the satellites around Gotham, broadcasting live to the whole world with an instant replay, what each cop was trying to do before Batman intervened. Naturally, as happens sometimes, the tide of public opinion turns enough that some officers start getting disciplined. As this happens, cops begin quitting the force in droves, closing down entire precincts in protest. You'll be begging for us back, they say. Remember earlier how I said this is where the thread starts to fall apart, referring to introducing Joe Chill as a cop who could never get away with killing 2 billionaires? Well, this is where the crumbs, the debris that remained of that thread themselves begin to fall apart on what must be a molecular level. This entire story is predicated on accurately representing modern American policing. Where in the fuck of modern American policing do you see cops being disciplined to such an extreme that so many cops quit the force that it results in multiple precincts being shut down? There is no way that would ever happen. You want to know how I know there's no way this would never happen? Because it isn't happening. Okay, there are countless videos, photos, personal accounts of the police actually assaulting peaceful protesters for nothing more than exercising their First Amendment rights, arresting or assaulting journalists for once again exercising their First Amendment rights.
Shut! I'm getting. Katie, are you okay?
Pushing protesters into a trap where they're repeatedly tear gassed and shot with pepper or rubber bullets, and assaulting or even murdering people that didn't even have anything to do with the protests. Hey everyone, I'm here in the editing bay, aka my closet, and so finding and putting together all of that footage proved to be a monumentally depressing task, and it didn't really feel right to show all of that footage of actual human suffering and then go back to joking and talking about fucking Batman. I feel like I needed a palate cleanser, and I didn't really know what else to put here, so here's a picture of a nice dog, a nice little doggy. Isn't he nice? Is he a nice, you don't think about the, you know, all the human rights violations that no one is going to hold the US government accountable for. This shit is already being broadcasted to the whole world with an instant replay, as you put it. Now, maybe my research is inadequate, but I could only find one precinct in eastern Seattle that closed down, and from what I can tell, the cops didn't quit. They didn't want to abandon this building. It seems to have been some kind of miscommunication issue. If I'm wrong about this story, or there's been some kind of update since I've recorded this, please feel free to correct me. Except they don't. That's when Bruce Wayne steps in, using what's left of his money and privilege to fund new alternatives to policing in that part of Gotham, showing a new way of doing things. Volunteers going door to door to help their neighbors, and each volunteer wears a bat pin on their chest. Oh, how cute. Okay, so this idea of community policing completely replacing a police department is just another completely unrealistic thing in the sea of unrealistic things that make up this thread that is supposed to be about realistically depicting the police. Yeah, it looks like that's about it. So yeah, I think we're done here. What do you think, Slicks? He's not even looking at the goddamn screen. Some people have no fucking respect for what we're doing here. Oh shit, it looks like there's one last tweet that I didn't see a second ago. Hold on, let me just scroll down. Alright, let's dive on in. Oh, Jesus. Honestly, it just feels gross to even read that. It doesn't even make any sense, because in the story, Bruce is still rich, and in real life, you're giving him another multi-million-dollar movie, so you're not calling to actually defund him in any way. The only reason why you choose the word defund in particular is to invoke the defund the police slogan, which is just like that's something that's something that actually matters. That's something that actually could benefit the lives of real people. Like, people are getting murdered out here. People are getting fucking killed in the streets. Dude, this is something that's actually important. And you're trying to draw a parallel with your Twitter thread about a Batman movie. That, combined with how earlier you heavily implied that the Christopher Nolan Batman movies have had some kind of tangible impact on the way that people in the real world view the police and are overly apologetic of their actions. Is that the right word? Apologetic? They're overly defensive of their actions. Let me say that instead. I should probably edit that out, but I'm not going to. You should know that I don't know what words mean. Like, those two things put together really give this like just an inflated sense of purpose. Like, this is, in actuality, this is half-assed, empty gestures on the level of the fucking Aunt Jemima syrup packaging, dude. Even if this movie got made exactly how you describe it, it wouldn't make any sense because a cop could never kill two multi-fucking billionaires and get away with it. Even then, this would still be on the same level. Okay, this is not important. It's really not. It's important in terms of how it affects the film industry, but outside of that, I mean, big blockbuster movies don't really affect much of anything. Especially superhero movies. Dude, have you fucking seen Batman v Superman? What? It's a meaningless gesture, doesn't cost you anything, and you can point to it and feel better about yourself. Look, I did this. I changed Aunt Jemima's fucking syrup bottles. I'm progressive. Look, I changed the Batman movies so that the police are bad. A-cab, am I right? I'm progressive. When, in actuality, this doesn't benefit anyone.
And now, the conclusion.
I don't know anything about this Sean Kelly guy outside of this single thread. I'm not saying he's a bad guy, I'm not trying to cancel him or whatever. For all I know, he's the best man in the world. I mean, he's on Twitter, so I doubt it. He just makes so many changes to the characters of the story that you might as well just make up a new story. I'm not trying to say that you can't deal with real world issues in media or even in superhero media. The Boys on Amazon is an excellent show. It deals with evil corporations covering up their horrible actions and not being held accountable, consumerism, celebrity worship, sex perverts, laser babies, drug addiction, and many other real world issues. But Batman is not the correct venue for portraying sensitive real issues like police brutality, racial injustice, the class divide. This story wouldn't work for the same reason that Batman v Superman and Man of Steel don't work, right? Because yeah, if Superman came to Earth, he would be arrested by the military. There'd be people on CNN saying Superman should do this. No, Superman shouldn't be allowed to do this. Should Superman just fuck off and leave? That would happen, but I don't want to see that in a Superman movie. or a Batman movie, because I live that all the time. Do I have to be reminded every waking moment of every day that everything is horrible? That the police just kill people? Superman, Batman, the Avengers, these characters are about escapism. They're about pretending for just a little bit that you live in a world where people can be so morally righteous that they can overcome the odds and beat any villain. That's what these are about. I think there is value in just escaping from the world you live in, just for a couple hours. Why are you trying to take that away from me, Sean Kelly? Why are you doing this to me, dude? In the end, his efforts to make the Batman story more realistic come off as more condescending and out of touch than anything else. I mean, he says he doesn't like the messaging in the Nolan Batman movies, but how is the messaging in this movie any better? Like, oh, don't worry everyone, we just gotta wait for some white billionaire to swoop out of the sky with a fucking bat costume on. He's the only one who can save us by, what's he gonna do? He's gonna document and release evidence of police brutality in America? Wow, it's not like people have been doing that since the fucking 1960s or anything. A billionaire is not going to come save us. And actually, the idea from earlier where like a movie or a show about a rich guy trying to use his wealth to demilitarize the police sounds way more interesting and cool than this fucking lame-ass Batman idea. That sounds cool. It'd be like Succession or something, you know, where it's about like boardrooms and shit, but there's you know, every now and then like a cop is like, I'm gonna fucking kill this guy, so there's like a little bit of violence and action every now and then, but not super often, because it's smart and sophisticated. That's the kind of show I'm talking about. HBO, I'll be waiting by the phone. Got any closing words for us, Slicks? So fucking sick of this guy.